I'm Janice Fine, and this is my talk, Resisting the Future of Work, Constructing a Future for Workers. At the core of the future of work discourse in the US, there lies an authoritative determinism, a voice that tells us again and again that it is just not possible to exercise democratic control over technology in economy and society. Mainstream economists acknowledge and even bemoan the most recent round of the schumpétérienne creative destruction of capitalism. Subcontracting and independent contracting, work for hire, gig arrangements, compensation and management by algorithm, and through GPS, a stunning level of electronic productivity monitoring and surveillance, facilitating the centralization of control and the decentralization of production. But they do it as if they are weathermen, tracing the arc of a giant tornado or meteor that is hurtling toward the earth, unfortunate but unstoppable. The pandemic has only exacerbated this sense of technological inevitability with Amazon, the e-commerce juggernaut, as the major case in point. With the introduction of one-day shipping and then the uptick in demand due to the pandemic, Amazon has needed many more warehouses and pickers, packers, and sorters. It tripled the number of US warehouses for last-minute deliveries this year. Just 2 years ago, the workforce was at about 650,000, but it is now up to 1.2 million globally, not even counting the 500,000 delivery drivers who as contractors do not work for the company directly, and that means they receive no benefits. Between January and October of 2020, the company added 427,300 workers, up 50% from the previous year. And from July of 2020, it hired at a rate of 2,800 workers a day. 810,000 workers are in the US, 85% of whom are spatially fixed in warehouses and operations. The company's unprecedented pace evokes comparison to wartime hiring in the shipbuilding sector during the early years of World War II and the post-war home building industry. This expansion has been supported by an army of 1,000 tech workers who have built a fully automated hiring system where prospective workers never actually talk to a single human being. A fitting warm-up for what they experience when they walk through the warehouse door and discover the backbreaking workload and pace of the order fulfillment process, their every move intricately monitored. As Gutelius and Theodore write, the new algorithmic management introduces new forms of workplace control where the regulation of workers' performance is granular, scalable, and relentless. Technology is enormously effective camouflage for the employment relationship itself, often making it difficult to actually locate the boss in the machine. So much is spatially unfixed. Hiring over social media, utilizing online communication and tracking platforms that control the interface between workers and their customers, setting rates, rating workers, and conducting ongoing surveillance, all while telling workers and the public that they are their own bosses, has made it difficult to collectively name the problem of exploitative work practices and confront an actual target with demands. When you are your own boss, you have only yourself to blame, right? Although the technology is new, the challenge it poses for workers is not unprecedented. As Cobble and Merrill point out, throughout history, workers have faced disruptive technological changes that have been just as sweeping in scale and scope. What's different is the struggle to organize. There is no fixing work, they argue, without fixing the social structure and power arrangements in which it occurs. For many of these workers, structural power, labor market bargaining power arising from low unemployment or high demand for scarce skills, or workplace power derived from strategic location within an integrated production process or supply chain is in short supply. Instead, they are relying on associational power, which comes through the formation of collective organizations of workers, including unions, worker centers, community organizations, political parties, works councils, and cooperatives, and they are leveraging institutional power through legal challenges, policy enactment, regulation, and enforcement. From the New Deal through the 1970s, workers were able to establish powerful organizations and effectively exercise their structural power to leverage bargaining with their employers. But this system has been in shambles for quite some time, and the political struggle to update it over the past 40 years has been unsuccessful. Union density today is roughly 1/3 of what it was in the mid-1960s, and it's almost as low as it was in 1930, prior to the passage of the National Labor Relations Act. All this while 60 million union workers in the United States say that they would like to have a union in their workplace. The long offensive against labor, abetted by right-to-work laws in the states, employer opposition largely unchecked by state or federal law, and prolonged legal and political attacks on basic bargaining rights, has driven union membership to record lows. The share of all workers belonging to a union, 10.5%, is now about where it was at the turn of the last century. But the share of private sector workers belonging to a union, well, that's even lower, 6.4%, which means it's now lower than it was in 1890. A full 94% of private sector workers are non-union. This has resulted in reductions in workers' structural power in industries and local labor markets. And since labor organizations are prohibited from using economic pressure on one company to affect the labor relations of another company, it's called a secondary boycott. Subcontracting also protects the dominant enterprise from strikes, picketing, and coercive demonstrations directed at it by the contractor's employees. The failure of the National Labor Relations Act to outlaw coercive employer behaviors like captive audience meetings, flooding the workplace with anti-union propaganda, while banning union organizers from communicating with workers at the worksite, combined with weak penalties and enforcement provisions, not to mention the ability to permanently replace striking workers, has made it impossible for many workers to meaningfully exercise the right to organize. This is playing out now in the Amazon warehouse worker organizing drive in Bessemer, Alabama, where those 5,800 workers have been subjected to a daily barrage of highly sophisticated anti-union communication, and it seems to be having the desired effect. Large numbers of workers inside the warehouse are reportedly wearing anti-union buttons and repeating the arguments they are hearing about unions in general, and the retail, wholesale, and department store union in particular. Capitalism is endlessly creative. Business strategies and models keep morphing, but as a consequence of policy drift, unions have not been able to change with them, as labor laws have remained marooned in the 1930s. Thus, there is a mismatch between business's power to make unilateral changes to the employment relationship and capture most of the gains made possible by the new technology, and labor's power to leverage business to negotiate over changes to the employment relationship and share the financial gains. From the grassroots, workers have been fighting back, and another discourse about the future of work is emergent. One that is rejecting technological determinism in favor of democratic deliberation and choice. Far from Luddite, these movements are embracing technology, but on their own terms and for their own purposes, seeking to avail themselves of its liberatory potential in terms of flexibility, and especially to use its organizing affordances to build associational power through the identification of online gathering spaces, facilitation of communication, information sharing, community building, organizing, and action. Dialectically speaking, the technology that has so far functioned to enable the oppression of the many and profit for the few also holds the capacity for liberation and sharing of the profit for the many. Workers are organizing through unions, minority union formations, worker associations, and worker centers. Efforts are being led by marginalized workforces long excluded by federal labor laws, like domestic workers, low-end construction workers and day laborers, taxi drivers and delivery riders, organizing under the banner of essential workers, are taking action for workplace and industry change and broader economic and social welfare policies. Other campaigns are being mounted by workforces long abandoned by mainstream unions, like retail and restaurant workers at the bottom of the wage distribution. Action is being taken as well by digital media journalists and privileged tech workers at the top of the wage distribution, disturbed by the nefarious ends to which their labor is being put. They are drawing attention to the human costs of new tech-enabled employment arrangements, inserting a critique into arenas of popular culture, proposing policy changes, and demanding a greater say in their conditions of work. The struggle is characterized by a wildly asymmetric power distribution, to be sure, also something that is not new in labor history. Whether the resistance can grow strong enough to compel a Polanyian correction, especially in the face of the partisan polarization of the US Congress, and institutional rules requiring impossibly high levels of agreement, is an open question. In the absence of structural power, organizations have been building associational and institutional power. Certainly after the Trump years of the National Labor Relations Board even refusing to recognize any labor rights for gig workers, under President Biden, we have already seen sympathetic NLRB rulings, and we will see more that allow for up the chain and joint employer liability for labor violations, apply more rigorous standards to determine who is an independent contractor, and sanction union busting. Biden has come out strongly in support of union organizing, making a strong statement 2 weeks before the Amazon vote. Less clear is whether it will be possible, given current Senate rules, which require a supermajority, to pass the PRO Act, the comprehensive federal labor law reform proposal currently in Congress. The AFL-CIO, the coalition of national unions, has been the backbone of the electoral fightback and legal challenges to the Trump regime. SEIU, one of the nation's largest unions, has invested enormous organizational and financial resources into the game-changing Fight for 15 campaign. Journalists and production workers in the media have long experienced the impact of technology on their labor processes. They have had their business model upended in recent years, leading to frequent financial crises, layoffs, and benefit cuts. In the words of the TPM workers, we see ourselves as part of the broader unionization movement across digital news media, an industry racked by constant disruption, and many of our employees have experienced firsthand. This has led workers at TPM and other digital media companies, including Slate and BuzzFeed News, as well as the US staff of 11 future PLC digital publications, to unionize over the past few years. The alt labor sector, worker centers, worker associations, minority unions, labor community coalitions, which is adjacent to the traditional union sector, is where a lot of the ideas, creativity, and dynamism is coming from. These organizations are building associational power among workers where there has been far too little, bringing together bases of workers, facilitating spaces for them to find the courage to take risks and to tell their stories, which are very effective in inspiring public empathy. Through casting issues in right and wrong terms and naming and shaming companies, they are exercising a kind of moral or symbolic power. Through thoughtful framing, meme making, and the recruitment of well-known cultural messengers, they are influencing how worker issues are covered by the media and presented to the public. Through institutional power resources, they are developing legal arguments, bringing class actions, filing public wage theft, health and safety claims, and pushing for more effective enforcement strategies. They are refining policy ideas and mounting legislative campaigns at the state and local levels where it is politically feasible to attempt to win through state action that which has not been able to be won through economic and associational power alone. There are now more than 226 worker centers in cities and towns across the United States, and significant national networks of worker centers as well. Despite their comparatively modest numbers, these organizations are having an outsized influence on labor and employment policy in their cities and states, as well as nationally. And they have been in the thick of challenging the future of work discourse and fighting at companies like Amazon. In Shakopee, Minnesota, where it is estimated that Amazon employs over 1,000 East African Muslim immigrants at 4 warehouses, the Awood Center, an immigrant worker center, led a job action on Amazon Prime Day in 2018 to demand accommodations for Ramadan, the establishment of a dedicated prayer space, attention to worker complaints, support for affordable housing, and a reduction of the punishing pace of work. During the same period, Amazon's logistics operation in New York City expanded geometrically, ultimately opening a 1 million square foot fulfillment center on Staten Island and other facilities in Queens and the Bronx. When Amazon selected Long Island City for its HQ2 location after the state of New York offered it $3 billion in tax breaks, a worker center called Make the Road New York became a leading actor in a community campaign to require the company to commit to affordable housing and other community benefits, honor the right to organize, and agree to card check neutrality, and also to stop providing facial recognition software to ICE. The spirited campaign leveraged electoral relationships that organizations had built with powerful state and local elected officials. And after 4 months of intensive action, Amazon pulled out of the HQ2 deal, which the activists rightfully claimed as a victory because it demonstrated that communities would stand up to Amazon. The Warehouse Workers Resource Center in California's Inland Empire, home to an enormous warehouse sector, has been organizing the workers in the massive Walmart and Amazon warehouses, some employed directly, many through third parties and staffing agencies, for over a decade. Although their long-term goal is unionization, their organizing, legal, policy, and media work has gotten results. They have filed thousands of wage and hour cases that have cost the company millions, won the abolition of piece rates in California, and forced companies to install air conditioners after years of workers collapsing from heat exhaustion. In April of 2021, right now, the Warehouse Workers for Justice in Chicago, a worker center affiliated with the United Electrical Workers, is campaigning to get their 2 US senators to reject North Point, a massive warehousing development southwest of the city that would pave over close to 3,000 acres of farmland and exacerbate diesel pollution in exchange for low-paying warehouse jobs. Instead, they're calling for their senators to support the Green New Deal for economic and environmental justice. From an initial base of Walmart workers, which was originally part of the United Food and Commercial Workers, that used social media to connect people into communities of peer support and action, an organization of workers across retail, United for Respect, has been growing. Established by veteran organizers from the SEIU Justice for Janitors campaign, Our Walmart recruited hundreds of leaders around the country, and tens of thousands of workers in all 50 states use Our's tool at their worksite or online. Our Walmart is built so members can support each other, share information around rights and resources, advocate for improved workplace conditions, share stories publicly, propose policy improvements, participate in leadership training, and build alliances with community partners. Inspired by the effectiveness of other online worker networks, Our developed a peer-to-peer digital tool called Work It. Workers download the application to their smartphones and can ask questions regarding Walmart policies and problems at work. An artificial intelligence system trained by Walmart workers and advocates answers the questions. And if there are more complicated questions, or if the issues are recurring across an area or the whole company, the worker is put in touch with one of about 60 rank and file Walmart workers who are currently acting as experts and leaders who respond online and engage with the worker. If possible, the worker is put into a private Facebook group dealing with the issue and active in organizing around it. Our Walmart uses private Facebook groups as a major venue for organizing and as the next step after online contact through Work It. The public Facebook group now reaches about 500,000 Walmart workers, and about 40,000 of those are in private Facebook groups where organizing happens. Initially, a worker is reached out to using texting or on Work It. If they're willing and engaged, they are talked to by phone or in person in order to determine if they are legitimate, and then asked to join a private Facebook group. During the pandemic, New York City restaurants, workers, and residents have become increasingly reliant upon intrepid food delivery workers, deliveristas on electric bikes working for delivery apps like DoorDash and Relay in all weather, but treated like pests by many of the restaurants who deny them basic worker protections. Rather than the essential workers that they are, restaurants refuse to provide bathroom access or spaces where they can safely wait between deliveries. Apps downgrade their ratings or even drop them based on customer complaints that are often the fault of the restaurant, not the courier, like the delivery being late or having the wrong items included in the order. The deliveristas say that DoorDash pays about $4 per delivery plus tips, and Relay about $11 an hour plus tips. But they can never be certain they are receiving their rightful tips due to restaurants increasingly not providing receipts with their orders. Both DoorDash and Relay have been the subjects of complaints and lawsuits over underpayment, diverted tips, lack of overtime pay, and misleading customers into believing their tips were going to the delivery workers. Organizers within the largely indigenous Mexican and Guatemalan workforce created WhatsApp groups to be able to provide mutual aid and support during shifts in case of robberies, muggings, and accidents, communicate about soccer games between the lunch and dinner time shifts, get together for potluck dinners, and coordinate protest actions and meetings with elected officials. Most recently, with the help from the Urban Justice Center, they have formed Los Deliveristas Unidos to fight to be classified as employees rather than independent contractors, be paid a living wage, and gain access to bathroom and safe waiting areas. Rideshare Drivers United, which has organized thousands of drivers in Los Angeles, has utilized Facebook and Facebook ads to identify drivers and recruit them into the organization. It has been utilizing an in-house software tool designed by an organizer who is also a programmer that is a flexible organizing platform and facilitates onboarding newcomers, scheduling and teeing up one-on-one organizing calls for member organizers, communicating with members, conducting surveys, and mobilizing for action. Rideshare Drivers United can quickly reach drivers when platforms have unilaterally cut mileage rates or summarily deactivated workers, or when they are rallying for better pay rates or adoption of the Driver's Bill of Rights. The software enables petitioning, text banking, phone banking, and contacting elected officials. They also created electronic versions of important documents and hyperlinks for filing them. A wage claim form with capacity to calculate wages owed can be completed and automatically filed with the State Department of Labor, and terms of service agreements of the major transportation and delivery companies, so that drivers are able to fill out forms to opt out of problematic platform changes within narrow timeframes. The National Day Laborer Organizing Network developed a wage theft app for jornaleros and a software system that enables workers to have centralized records of each job they do, the name of the contractor, and what they were paid, which they can use for tax purposes and to apply for immigration status, which is in use at centers across the country. In 2016, the Machinists Union in New York, in a controversial partnership with Uber, established a unique worker organization, the Independent Drivers Guild. They signed a contract which provided for funding from Uber, monthly meetings with Uber management, a review board for drivers to appeal terminations by the app, and some modest benefits, including life insurance and discounted legal services. The IDG was given access to driver contact information by Uber, enabling it to recruit drivers to the organization. But it had to agree not to attempt to unionize drivers during the 5-year life of the contract, or to lobby for a shift from independent contractor to employee status. It is also not allowed to negotiate fares, commissions, or benefits with Uber unless the NLRB makes a contrary classification decision, and it is not allowed to negotiate fares, commissions, or benefits with Uber. The IDG charges a membership fee of $18 a month and now claims to represent 65,000 drivers that use the Uber app in New York City. New York Taxi Workers Alliance and Rideshare Drivers United feel this is a company union and that in exchange for access to the workforce, it made a devil's bargain. This past January, workers at Google's parent company formed the Alphabet Workers Union, a minority union and affiliate of the Communication Workers of America. 20 years ago, CWA organized workers at IBM and Microsoft to form minority unions. But whereas those efforts were focused on employment issues, these Alphabet workers are more focused on the common good, demanding, quote, to use our reclaimed power to control what we work on and how it is used, to ensure that Alphabet acts ethically and in the best interest of society and the environment. Tech workers are different, of course, from low-wage fast food workers organizing for higher pay. The median Alphabet employee earned $258,708 in 2019. Instead, the union drive was born out of 4 years of worker dissatisfaction with company behavior. It began in 2018 with employee opposition to a US government contract to use artificial intelligence to improve drone strike targeting. And then a 20,000 employee walkout in response to multi-million-dollar settlements with executives accused of sexual misconduct, and a policy that required workers to sign away their right to go to court if they faced sexual harassment. Since then, several activists have been fired, and Google employees involved with organizing say they've been retaliated against repeatedly. Late last year, the firing of an AI researcher triggered another wave of discontent, this time with the company's approach to racism and racial disparities. Google actually attempted to change labor law during 2016 and 2017 in a way that would prohibit workers from using company email to communicate with each other about workplace issues, after the National Labor Relations Board during the Obama administration had broadened workers' rights to use company email to organize around issues on the job. Workers at other tech companies, although not having taken the step to form minority unions, are also pressuring their employers around moral questions. During the final days of the Trump administration, after the assault on the Capitol, an Amazon employee advocacy group urged the company to cut ties with Parler, a social media service popular with far-right political figures. And within a few days, Amazon Web Services said it would no longer provide services to Parler. More than 350 Twitter employees signed a letter urging CEO Jack Dorsey and other executives to permanently ban President Trump from Twitter, which it did just a few hours later. During the last decade, SEIU, in the case of the $15 minimum wage, and worker center and community organizing groups across the country have turned to the state in an effort to win worker protections through policy. They have succeeded in passing minimum wage laws higher than the federal level in over 29 states and 44 localities. They've enacted paid sick leave in 13 states, 19 cities, and 3 counties, and they've passed domestic worker Bill of Rights legislation in 9 states and 1 city. They've won ban the box laws, removing conviction history questions on job applications across 35 states and over 150 cities and counties. And they're passing predictive scheduling laws in 6 cities already. Most recently, they passed just cause employment protections for parking employees in Philadelphia and fast food workers in New York City. The scheduling laws in particular have taken on electronic scheduling systems that enable companies to implement the staffing equivalent of a just-in-time production system, giving workers less advanced notice of their schedules and subjecting them to last-minute shift changes and cancellations. Sectoral minimum wage and standards policies have been set for airports and large hotels in Washington state, as well as Los Angeles and Long Beach in California. Domestic worker standards boards have been established in Seattle and Philadelphia that provide a forum for domestic workers, their employers, worker organizations, and the public to deliberate about strategies for improving working conditions in a very challenging industry. Although ultimately limited to an advisory role, the Wage Board in Seattle is empowered to make recommendations on legislation and policy changes that must be reviewed by the mayor and city council, and has a broad mandate that includes wages, pay differentials, access to paid time off, accreditation, portable retirement, and healthcare benefits, and outreach and enforcement strategies. In New York City, there's a policy that provides specific protections to freelance workers, and as I mentioned, the first municipal just cause worker protection bills in the nation. The agency also created a paid care division, which focuses on defending the rights and improving the job quality of home health and personal care attendants, nannies, caregivers, and house cleaners. Although most advocates have been focused on enacting new policies for their own sake, rather than as a vehicle for organizing or enabling new organizations, some have been experimenting with using legislation to support the right to organize and to facilitate the establishment of organizations. In this vein, collective bargaining models for independent contractors not bound by the strictures of the National Labor Relations Act have been pursued in the Seattle and New York City transportation sectors. In Seattle in 2015, the Teamsters tried to establish an actual collective bargaining regime at the municipal level for platform drivers who are independent contractors that would have been overseen by the city, but it was found to be in violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals on the grounds that only states could establish collective bargaining laws for independent contractors. The union pivoted to a different set of municipal policies, including the establishment of a process for setting minimum wage standards, a surcharge on TNC rides to finance a sector-wide minimum wage, and a nonprofit driver resolution center that could function as an organizing vehicle for drivers. In New York City, a bill was enacted in 2017 at the urging of SEIU 32BJ and Fast Food Forward in connection with the Fight for 15. The bill enables fast food workers to make voluntary contributions to nonprofit organizations of their choice through payroll deductions. It allows groups of 500 workers or more to collect dues to establish nonprofit membership associations to advocate for higher wages and better working conditions. In this case, a court challenge proved unsuccessful and it was upheld. By far, the most sweeping reform was passed in California, where gig workers in partnership with leaders at the helm of the State Department of Labor and the state legislature organized in support of legislation that, by requiring the stringent ABC test, created the presumption that Uber and Lyft drivers were employees instead of independent contractors. The companies argued that drivers and workers weren't core to their business and that they were a technology business first, to sidestep the first prong of the ABC test. Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, and many other tech firms pledged to spend whatever it would take to roll back AB5. While the companies argued that they would lose all flexibility and have to schedule drivers, the reality is that although basic worker protections like breaks, workers' comp, and unemployment insurance would have to be offered, there was nothing that dictated that they had to change their business model beyond misclassifying the workers as independent contractors. The state legislature passed AB5 and the governor signed it into law in 2019. But the following year, Uber and others spent in excess of $200 million to pass a ballot question which framed the issue as pernicious state overreach that would deny the poor drivers the flexibility they prized. It passed overwhelmingly, and drivers are now fully exempted from the law. But in the UK, where the venue was the judiciary, there has been a completely different outcome. On February 19th, 2021, in a case brought by Uber drivers who were part of a small union, the UK Supreme Court upheld the decision that had begun with an employment tribunal 5 years earlier, and then wended its way through the Employment Appeal Tribunal and the Court of Appeal, where it was upheld that drivers, contrary to a contract signed between workers and Uber, that it was simply a platform and drivers could use to connect with passengers, that drivers were not, in fact, independent contractors, but rather employees of Uber. The court noted that Uber controlled many facets of how drivers were providing the service, including fee setting, allocating tips, setting routes and restricting contact between drivers and passengers. The court also found that drivers were working and therefore entitled to the minimum wage whenever they had their app switched on. Drivers must accept a certain percentage of trips. Thus, a tiny union managed through institutional power to win a ruling that Uber drivers are workers, where it is likely that no amount of organizing could have prevailed. Those who are looking for one common pathway to success may find all of these disparate examples unsatisfying, but there are common elements: an organized and unified base of workers able to articulate a moral critique of what is happening to them at work, and a set of demands that target the company directly, or the courts, the city councils, the legislatures, or government agencies. Without organization, there would be no legal cases. There would be no policies enacted. There is a symbiotic relationship between associational and institutional power resources. The future is unwritten. Workers are beginning to write it.